Respected ladies and gentlemen and children, peace be upon you all. I begin in the name of God, the most kind and all-deserving of praise. It's an absolute honor to once again to be asked to host the 4th Peace and Unity Conference, and for the second time at these beautiful surroundings in the Glasgow City Chambers. I would like to also announce that today I am sharing the hosting duties with Fariha Thomas, who will introduce the first guest speaker. Just a couple of housekeeping duties. I've been informed by the staff, Derek and Stevie, to the right-hand side, that they have no scheduled fire alarms. If one was to sound, everyone is to be seated, and you will be guided out of the building in a calm and safe manner. Toilets are also out the same entrance on the right-hand side. Of course, a very big and warm thank you to you all for coming here tonight. Peace and unity is the ultimate utopia. It's made ever more challenging with ongoing wars, poverty, global warming, exploitation, and political corruption. These are a few of the many ingredients served to divide communities with ignorance and corruption, rather than demonstrate understanding, love, and justice. This year we have concentrated on highlighting the rights of children, and it doesn't need much justification to say why. Children are the most vulnerable in society. No peace nor unity can exist without children being safe, fed, and warm. Being kept away from the divisive nature of conflicts and battles for resources is crucial for the young generation to flourish. On a recent trip to Iraq that I just made last week, along with some in this audience, I saw with my own eyes and heard with my own ears the stories of children losing their fathers defending the land of Iraq from invading mafias disguised by names they have no right to use. These conflicts and tribulations may take place around the corner or thousands of miles away from us, but they affect us all in one human society. Some of the themes on discussion table tonight center on trafficking, radicalisation, and of course, international conflicts. Decisions, or the lack of decisions, to positively influence the plight of people, including children, can take place right here in Scotland. With this in mind, we want to give you a special thank you to all of you at the beginning for everyone's attendance here tonight. Your attendance and impending participation really highlights how you value this conference and its themes. And your role in the community and greater society is crucial in shaping or molding the world we want, full of justice and love. We have presence from across the political spectrum, as well as civic, police, Scotland, armed forces, local activists and community workers, and all faith communities. We do have a packed program with slightly different format from last year, and one we hope to all gain from. Before we go to our guests, if you don't mind, we will have a couple of verses from the Holy Quran relevant to tonight's topic being recited. If Muhammad al-Marhoon could come forward along with Rida Bilhas. Muhammad Marhoon will recite the verses in Arabic, and Rida will translate in English.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل تعالوا أتل ما حرم ربكم عليكم ألا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا ولا تقتلوا أولادكم من إملاق نحن نرزقكم وإياهم ولا تقربوا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن ولا تقتلوا النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تعقلون ولا تقربوا مال اليتيم إلا بالتي هي أحسن حتى يبلغ أشده وأوفوا الكيل والميزان بالقسط لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولو كان ذا قربى وبعهد الله أوفوا ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تذكرون وأن هذا صراطي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولا تتبعوا السبل فتفرق بكم عن سبيله ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تتقون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Say, come, I will recite what your Lord has prohibited to you. He commands that you not associate anything with him, and to parents good treatment. And do not kill your children out of poverty. We will provide for you and them. And do not approach immortalities, what is apparent of them and what is concealed. And do not kill the soul which Allah has forbidden to be killed except by legal right. This has He instructed you, that you may use reason. And that do not approach the orphan's property except in a good way. That is best until he reaches maturity. And give full measure and weight in justice. We do not charge any soul except with that within its capacity. And when you testify, be just, even if it concerns a near relative. And the covenant of Allah fulfill. This has He instructed you, that you may remember. And moreover, this is my path, so follow it. And do not follow other paths, for they will separate you away from His path. This has He instructed you, that you may become righteous.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. Just before I go on to introducing the first speaker, just another couple of housekeeping things. If people's phones are on, can you make sure you put them to silent? And every table will have 1 or 2 copies of the programme, which looks like this. So just in case you haven't spotted it, if you want to know the timetable and who's speaking, you can see it in there, and the biographies of the different speakers. This conference has been organised by the Al Bayt Society Scotland in collaboration with several local community groups. And the heartbeat of Al Bayt for nearly 30 years has been Azam Muhammad, also known as Abu Jaffa. While his hair has got greyer over the time, his heart still races in passion to help people of all backgrounds. And as you can see in the biography in the programme, Azam hasn't shirked a challenge, and this conference is another achievement worthy of distinct acknowledgement, Not that he craves acknowledgement. I know myself, he's a very humble but a very, very hard-working man. It's not in his personality to seek any kind of glory. He just wants to work for the good of all. Azam, can you please come to the platform? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank you all for coming along tonight, especially our dear First Minister, Nicolas Sturgeon, which will be arriving within 5 minutes. I really appreciate the effort everyone has made to be here. We even have people coming from all parts of UK and abroad. This event is to bring us together, learn and practice our strong relation toward obtaining peace and unity. The Peace and Unity Conference started 4 years ago, and the aim was to bring everyone from all faith, all authorities, and all walk of life to build bridges between us for the best of our community. We can all come together, work together to make a difference. Without strong connection, nothing will be achieved. Our aim is not only to meet, but to focus on important issues affecting us all here and in other parts of the world. Last year, one of our themes was discussing the role of religion in tackling climate change. We are proud to say, without any political bias, that the Scottish Government has and continue to implement progressive climate change policy and programs, especially around renewable. This year, the topic of the right of children has been chosen. We all have either seen or heard of the horrendous stories surrounding military political conflict, the rise of poverty, as consequence, we forced labor of children, trafficking, etc. Children are the most vulnerable and the most affected in these cases, having lifetime impact, to which we all have a duty and responsibility to help prevent. As a group jointly, we can make a difference. Let us start the change from our home, from our family, from our street and town to our country. Let us spread the message of peace through our action. Let us, as a Scottish community, lead by example for unity and let the rest of the world follow. I am hoping this evening, which the open discussion, the insightful panel view and excellent speech will provide us with guidance and inspiration to take some action forward from tonight. The Peace and Unity Conference is not only this meeting tonight, but we have to further dialogue, the intrafaith and the interfaith dialogue. There are challenges, as you all know, of bringing communities of different view together. But we are happy to announce this morning, with the support of the MCS, Muslim Council of Scotland, we had a successful interfaith dialogue to bring Sunni and Shia imams and scholars to work together in unity. Tomorrow, we will have our interfaith dialogue, Muslim and Christian, building on the great work continually being done by Interfaith Scotland and Interfaith Glasgow in bringing people of all faiths and non-faith together. Before I go, I must thank also the Peace and Unity team, and the volunteer who work this event runs smoothly year after year without any recognition for their tireless work. Without their dedication, hard work, and passion, this would not happen. So thank you. Finally, I hope this conference will be beneficial to all of us, and we are able to take something away from tonight to make a positive change for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Abu Ja'far, as I refer to him very often. Abu Ja'far obviously doesn't, like was mentioned in his introduction, does not want or seek any pleasure in coming forward and talking about these conferences, but it is a great tribute to him that we continue and carry on these initiatives. Our next speaker, who has come with impeccable timing, is a special one who has truly been a great supporter of this conference from its inception. Before her current role as First Minister, for which she was formally nominated again in 2016, she actively participated at this conference in her role as Deputy First Minister, and we know from personal encounters how much she values the topics being highlighted here tonight. And we're looking forward to hearing more on that. Some might say there is an unstable political dynamic in the UK, especially with recent referendums. However, the First Minister, without any political bias, still exudes a demeanour of strength and compassion, and one I feel Scotland can be proud to be at the front of our political elite. Please give a very warm welcome to the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon.
Assalamu alaikum, good evening. What a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm sorry I arrived a little bit late this evening, but it was a pleasure to arrive here in time to hear the latter part of Azam Mohammed's speech, or Abu Ja'far as I know him as well. Azam is a dear, dear friend of mine, and he has done and continues to do so much to not just talk about the principles of peace and unity, but live and embody those principles of peace and unity. So it is always a pleasure to be here with you. Let me also thank everybody from the Al Bayt Society for organising this very important event, and thank all of the different faith groups and community organisations who support this event. It is a pleasure to see so many distinguished guests here, and also so many people and organisations representing the diversity of Scottish society. I think this gathering sends a really important message about Scotland and what it means to be here in Scotland. This won't surprise you to hear me say this. There are many things about Scotland that I am exceptionally proud of. Our weather is perhaps not one of them, but many other things that I am exceptionally proud of. But probably what I am proudest of all about Scotland is our diversity, is our multiculturalism, is our faith and respect for people of all faiths and of no faiths. And this conference, this gathering, embodies that. So it is really good to be here amongst you, celebrating and marking the commitment that all of us have to the values of peace, unity, and solidarity. And given the world we live in today, and given some of the things we witness across the world today, to stand here and talk about and articulate and dedicate ourselves to those principles, and let me repeat them: peace, unity, and solidarity. I think we need to see more peace, unity, and solidarity right across our world today, and we should be proud that we're standing for these principles here this evening. Now, Scotland looks forward next year to celebrating in 2018 our year of young people, a year where we will celebrate the contribution that young people make to our society, but also remind ourselves that it may be a cliche, but it's true. Young people are the future of our country, and we must invest in them, we must support them and enable them to reach their full potential. So it's really appropriate, I think, that the theme of this conference is children's rights. And I'll say a bit more about what we're doing here in Scotland to strengthen those rights a bit later on. But I welcome the fact that tonight's event really looks at children's rights from a truly international perspective. And it focuses on the wider issues facing children, not just here in our country, but right across the world. And of course, events, often very tragic events of recent years, have confirmed a hugely distressing truth that international conflicts disproportionately affect the lives of children. If we take the Syrian conflict alone, the United Nations estimates that nearly 6 million children are in need of humanitarian assistance, with almost half of them forced to flee their homes. Denying children the opportunity to grow up in a safe, loving environment is not just a tragedy for the individuals involved, it's also a tragedy for all of us in society. And of course, it creates serious problems for the future. That's why I believe passionately that every country has a responsibility, a moral responsibility to help those in need and to help address humanitarian crises wherever they occur. And I'm very proud that Scotland has played our part in welcoming Syrian refugees here to our country. In fact, all those who have come to the UK through the Syrian resettlement programme, a disproportionate number have come to Scotland, and they add hugely to our country and to what makes our country what it is at the moment. So working with everybody, we need to be welcoming to people from around the world, particularly to children who need our support. We should never, ever turn away from those most in need. Of course, human trafficking is another issue that affects particularly children. We know there's often a perception that that's a problem for other countries, but it's not always true. Last year, we had 150 potential victims of human trafficking identified in our country. Nearly a third of them were children. And unfortunately, these statistics almost certainly present only a partial picture of what is going on. That's why we've taken action, passing legislation, making it simpler to prosecute people. And earlier this year, we published our human trafficking and exploitation strategy. That sets out a range of ways in which we strive to support some of the most vulnerable children, not just in our country, but anywhere on the planet. These issues are important. They are important for the individuals that we are seeking to help, but they are also important for other reasons as well. To be very clear that Scotland is an open, welcoming, diverse country that wants to play our part in building a better and a safer world. But they're also important in terms of the final issue I want to touch on this evening. We know that often when conflicts rage around the world, young people can be particularly susceptible to extremist ideologies. And that's why it is so important that we continue to work so closely with faith and community groups to tackle the issues that can lead to the alienation of our young people. It's why we have guidance and resources for teachers and children so that political issues and social issues can be discussed rationally and respectfully in our schools. And it's one of the reasons why we have a national action plan on internet safety for children and young people, because many of the messages that seek to radicalise young people, of course, are messages through the internet. But ultimately, of course, the best way we can stand against radicalisation and extremism is by doing these two things. Firstly, remembering the principles that we're here tonight to celebrate: solidarity and unity. If we stand together as one society, respecting the diversity of this society, then we marginalise and alienate not our young people, but the extremists who would want to divide us. And all faiths, all communities in Scotland do stand together and must continue to do so. But the second thing we must do is speak up loudly and clearly against injustice across the world. We stand against injustice here in our own society, but we must never, ever shy away from calling out, speaking up against and challenging injustice wherever it occurs across the world. It's sending a strong message that those principles of solidarity and unity are not just for those of us here in Scotland, but principles that we want to share with our wider world. So this conference is an important occasion to rededicate ourselves to all of that work. As I said a moment ago, one of the things we should be proudest of in our country here is our diversity, but also our solidarity and our unity. Scotland is stronger, much, much stronger, because of the contribution of those who have chosen to make Scotland their home, or whose ancestors chose to make Scotland their home. We must always celebrate that diversity. We must always stand united against those who seek to divide us. And above all else, we must be determined to build a better world for the children who come after us. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be with you this evening. Please enjoy the rest of the proceedings.
Thank you. Thank you very much, First Minister. Again, want to positively reinforce the comments made by the First Minister today, and I really like how she highlighted the solidarity and peace and unity that Scotland embodies, and it's worthy of highlighting. And we are very grateful that we have a leader in our Parliament that echoes these sentiments, so thank you once again. We are very grateful for our next guest speaker present with us today. He isn't long off from a flight from Canada, just very recently, where he was involved in yet another interfaith dialogue, as well as local community events. Indeed, I and the stage manager Fairoz, as well as others in here today, have had the personal privilege to have participated in interfaith trips in the past year. One with him in Geneva, where we visited the UN and the base for the World Council of Churches, and also in Pier de Primero in Italy, where Muslims and Christians were talking, living, and eating together in more than a symbolic act, but one truly enveloped by a wisdom of true unity, not uniformity. His academic background, as will be put up on the screen, means he has to balance a lot of classical Islamic study, teaching, with interreligious dialogue. So again, we are very grateful for his presence here tonight. Can you all show your appreciation for Sheikh Dr. Muhammad Ali Shumali.
Peace be with you. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, I am very grateful to God for giving me the blessing of being here for the second time, and also for being able to visit Scotland for another time in between in February when we attended the Scottish Parliament and I had time for reflection. So now Scotland brings me back again. The topic of rights for children, it's a very important topic, and I thought perhaps my contribution might be better to be talking about the significance of children from an Islamic perspective. But to be able to understand exactly the contribution of Islam, we should know what was the situation of children before Islam. Unfortunately, the society in Arab Peninsula before coming of Islam, in many, many aspects, lacked real humanity. It was a society which suffered from ignorance and darkness. But perhaps the most vulnerable were children. Children were not receiving sufficient respect and mercy, and most especially the girls. And the Quran clearly blames and condemns their practice of burying their daughters alive. So whenever someone was told that God has given you a daughter, the Quran says, ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا. Their face used to become dark out of anger. What I should do with this shame that I have a girl. Of course, there is a history for that, and that goes back to when in the past they were attacked and their women were taken by enemies. So out of that they developed this sense. But Islam brought respect for children, especially for the girls. And our Prophet used to call maximum respect for children, especially for girls. I would like to mention few examples and then make a comment that I think would be relevant to our world today. One incident which is very beautiful is our Prophet used to show lots of love to his children and grandchildren. For example, he used to kiss his grandchildren. In that society, it was a sign of weakness for a man to kiss his children. You should, keep your emotions inside. It was not a sign of strength. So one of the people who was there, he said to the Prophet, I never kissed my children. He was surprised how Rasulullah kisses his grandchildren. And Rasulullah said, Man la yarham, la yurham. If you don't show mercy, you will not receive mercy. You have to show mercy to children so that God would show mercy to you. In another incident, which may happen more than once, we find that the Prophet, when he was going to prostrate in sajda, as we call it, in prayer, sometimes his grandchildren, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, were going on back of the Prophet, and he was taking time. This is congregational prayer. And many people are in that prayer, but the Prophet had so much of love for his grandchildren that he was prolonging his prostration so that they come out of his back and then he stands up. In one incident that made a history, once when Prophet was going to start his prayer, as you know, we start with Takbiratul Ihram. We say God is greater. So Imam Hussein, his grandson, who was very little kid, he was in the prayer and he was not able to say Allahu Akbar. And the Prophet was asked by God to repeat. He repeated 7 times this so that this young child can also say properly, God is great. So this shows that love for children is essence of religion and essence of indeed humanity. We have a beautiful hadith from Prophet Muhammad that I think can summarize many things. He said, Ahibbus Sibyan, love children. As much as you can, you should show love and your affection to children. Warhamuhum, and should have mercy on children. Mercy, in my understanding, is when you show love by giving without expectation. When I give and I expect something, this is not rahmah. Rahmah is to love, but by giving, not just loving, giving, but without expecting. And also the Prophet said, whenever you promise children, you must keep your promise. Sometimes, some of us may say, when I promise an adult, I should keep my promise. But maybe children forget. So I can promise something and later I may not be able to do it, but just to make them happy for the moment, I give a promise. But this is not right. The Prophet said, إِذَا وَعَدْتُمُوهُمْ فَفُوا لَهُمْ. When you promise children, you should keep your promise. And then he said something which I think a great lesson. He said, your children look at you as your sustainers, as if you are the Lord. You should never disappoint the people who look at you as your Lord. So what I want to say is, we, whether it is our children or any children, we should look at them as if we are responsible, because they look at us as their Lord. They look at us as their sustainers. And one of the worst things that can happen is when an innocent child has put his or her trust in us, adults, if we mistreat them, if we abuse them. Our seventh Imam, Imam Kazim, said, God never gets angry as when he gets angry when women or children are abused. إن الله لا يغضب لشيء كغضبه للنساء والصبيان. So when children are abused, God is most unhappy with us. So my request is, of course, I don't think anyone here would be in need of this advice, but we have to work together to spread this message. That we work together to offer all children of the world, which are all innocent and which are all gifts of God. And in Islamic tradition, we believe all children, even miscarried babies, they go to heaven. Even we have hadith that a miscarried baby, when God says go to heaven, says, I don't go to heaven unless my parents join me. So all babies, all children, these are innocent. These are angels, and they go to heaven. Our responsibility is to make sure that as much as possible, we make the world safe, but not only safe, a warm and welcoming place for them. Sometimes I have this understanding that I would like to share with you. You know, when we buy, for example, a computer or a mobile, they tell us if you want to have a proper usage and life for their battery, first you should charge it completely. So if normally it takes half an hour, but puts it for a few hours or one day, so that it is 100% charged. I think we have to do the same with the children. Our childhood is when we need to make as much as possible a reserve of love and peace and tranquility, so that later in our life we would not face any problem. Children who receive love from their parents, from school, from community, these children in future would have a stable life, and they would not wish bad for other people. I am sure many of the people that do bad things and do criminal acts, if we look at their childhood, we realize that most of them have not received love and warmth when they were children. We have to make sure that we give unconditional, unlimited love and mercy to children, so that for the rest of their life they can always go back to their beautiful memories of childhood and get energy. Whenever they face a problem, they have such a reserve of light and hope in their childhood that they can always be empowered. So let us work together and promise to God that as much as we can, we make this world a better world for children, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their faith or background. May God help us, and may God be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shamali, for your words, really appropriate to today's conference, which is around peace and unity, but particularly focusing on children. And I hope it was very enlightening for people, both Muslims and non-Muslims, about the importance that Islam places on looking after children well. And I was pleased as well, you know, again, there's so many myths about Islam and women, and Islam holds women in very high esteem. So I was really pleased that Dr. Shamali, you also mentioned that. So thank you again, thank you so much. Once again, Police Scotland have shown their support for this conference and for initiatives such as these in the community. So we're very grateful tonight that we'll have contributions from two of their representatives. One, in a minute, our speaker on the panel, and later on the panel. Police Scotland's very important to keeping us all safe in our lives, and so it's so important that we can all work together. In a minute, I'm going to introduce Johnny Gwynn, whose CV is up there, yes, speaks for itself. And there'll be more up there than what I'm actually going to say, because I don't want to talk for too long. But some very important things that he has been involved in relevant to this conference. Johnny was actually the on-scene commander at Glasgow Airport when the horrendous terrorist attack took place, and was responsible for crises and consequent management issues during and following that attack. And then in 2013, he was appointed to the role of the Director of Child Exploitation Command, CEOP. And the role there was to reduce the risk faced by children from online sexual exploitation, which is, I think, a theme we're going to come back to later in the conference. And that's the national hub that works in concert with all the 45 police territorial forces in the United Kingdom. And in addition, Johnny was the UK's representative on the Virtual Global Task Force and International We Protect Advisory Board, focused on improving the international response to the threat posed by child sexual abuse, along with other police colleagues. But on 10th of October 2016, Johnny rejoined Police Scotland as the Deputy Chief Constable, Crime and Operations. So that's a huge range of experience, really relevant to the topics that we're hearing from tonight. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from you. So please, everybody, welcome Johnny Gwynn to the platform.
I'm not sure who put that together, but it's getting abbreviated when I get back to the office. Good evening. Middle age has caught up with me, so I'll need to keep putting these glasses on and off. Azam and the Albert Society, thank you for the invite this evening. And thank you all, whatever community you come from here in Scotland, for your support for policing. I know we are a group here tonight of many faiths and some of no faith, but actually as a police service, our job is to be relevant to everybody in every corner of this land. And I know, and you'll notice there's some police officers here as well with me from my team, we know that we couldn't do our job in the way we do without the trust and the support of the communities across the country. So I very rarely get the chance to say thank you publicly to all of you, but thank you for the way you allow us to police in the streets of Scotland, from the very tip in the north to the south. Trust is the issue of the age, I think, in so many ways, and we know it's the lifeblood of good policing here in Scotland. I'd like to just say also publicly thanks to my team, led by Chief Superintendent John Mackenzie. They're the ones who clearly got the memo about the uniform, and I didn't. But John, thank you for all that you do, and our community safety team, and the team that are with you tonight, and Shaheen, who's going to take part in the panel later. So there's been a little said about my background. I have a particular interest in what policing can do to protect children, having spent some time and the privilege of working with a team of really fantastic colleagues based in London, but doing work right across the world and right across not just the UK, but these islands into the Republic as well. And that's probably part of my background that makes me particularly interested in the theme of our conference this evening. I want to take you back to 1894, a small village in Nebraska in the USA, and into a very humble background. A young man was born by the name of Forrest Whitcraft. Forrest Whitcraft became a prominent member of the Scouting Association and leader in the Scouting Association in the States. He was a man who would describe himself as being humble, but actually had massive influence particularly for young people in the United States of America. In 1950, he wrote an essay which is very famous called Within My Power. And that essay was really challenging all of us to think about the legacy we leave behind and the influence we have on the young people who we touch. And I'm going to quote one part of his essay. You'll recognize it. You'll have seen it on inspirational posters. You'll have read it in newspapers. But 100 years from now, it won't matter what your bank account was like. It won't matter what sort of house you lived in. It won't matter what sort of car you drove. But that the world may be different because you or I were relevant and important in the life of even just one child. Whitcraft left this world in 1967, but I think he codified a principle in life by making sure we invest in the important things in life, like our young people, in a way that I don't think anybody else has captured. And his words are profound, and 67 years later, still remain relevant to us here in Scotland, so many miles away. In 1967, a then very young man was born into a community striven by religious tension, ripped asunder by bigotry and violence and hatred. That young man standing here, not so young today, quite a few years later. But actually, I know that I wouldn't have managed to get the privilege and advantage I have in life if there weren't people who believed in what Whitcraft tried to codify for us. There were people who made sure that people like me and my peers, friends at school, were able to take a path in life which was productive and was peaceful, where we became responsible citizens and effective contributors to the society, I hope, that we inhabited. And we weren't drawn into a cycle of violence and despair. Peace, however, though, is so much more than just the absence of violence. And our colleagues are here from the military, and they deal with that horrible end of life. And I think we, this week in particular, pay respect to what you do on our behalf. Thank you for all that you do. But it's so much more than just the absence of violence and conflict. It's something much deeper than that. And I'm privileged that I was surrounded by Whitcraft's followers. And my challenge to all of us and myself is, are we living by the challenge that Whitcraft gave us to focus on the things that matter most and not the things that matter least? As adults, we do have a real privilege insofar as we can leave a legacy. It's a leadership issue. We are all leaders in this room, whether you are the First Minister and the influence that she can exert across society here, or whether you think I'm just a community leader in a small corner of Glasgow or Edinburgh. We are all leaders. We all have the privilege to influence wherever we happen to be. And as the First Minister challenged us, kids aren't 100% of our population, and there are just around 1 million children here in Scotland, but they are 100% of our future. And actually we as adults have a responsibility, an ethical responsibility, to invest in them and their future, to make sure they are effective contributors and responsible citizens in our society. Unfortunately, though, our children face many risks. You all know that. I don't need to list them. There are risks to their healthy development in terms of prejudice. The police service hopefully has a role to play when prejudice is at the most extreme in combating that. Reduced opportunities in terms of their life chances and how we make sure there's equality and access to the privilege and opportunities that many of us in this room have had in life. But most of all, they're at risk because they are vulnerable, and our first speaker in introducing us tonight talked about that very issue. The vulnerable need to be protected, but that in itself is not enough. They need to be nourished. They need to be invested in. We need to spend time and effort in them. And in my work in CEOP, I saw too many children across the world who weren't protected, who definitely weren't nourished, both emotionally and in terms of food. And nobody was investing time and effort in them. It's a shame in our world the way so many of our children live in a world which is really, frankly, a long way away from Glasgow and a long way away from the privilege that we have here. We must help our children, whether they are abroad or here, navigate this complex world, and it's increasingly complex, and that needs a cooperative effort. The police service has a part to play in that, and I'm delighted to look onwards, because I don't do the work. It's John and his team and others like him who do the work, at some of the things that the police service do for you and for our children, working with the Violence Reduction Unit in terms of how we try and lift some young people out of really difficult situations and mentor them. Other work that we do in the community safety teams, working with communities, supporting you
as we try to play our part alongside communities. It's not a policing effort, it's a joint endeavour. It's a shared endeavour from all of us. I'm interested though that this week I was listening to Radio 4 yesterday morning, and 500 years ago Martin Luther penned his 92, I think it was, articles on Wittenberg Cathedral door, which started a change in the Christian church. But actually his work, his thought was given oxygen because of then a big change in technology in terms of the printing press. Our printing press today is a wee bit different. It's called the internet. And not that many years ago, we effectively doubled the size of the country by running a mezzanine deck across every community in the UK. You know, in the 60s, we built 16 new towns and cities. But actually, when the internet came along, it brought another level on top of every community. The internet is not a thing, it's a place. It's a place where our young people inhabit every day. And in the same way as we were growing up, we're taught how to navigate a road safely, how to avoid certain dangers in life. We need to teach our children how to avoid the dangers of the internet, whatever they may be, and they are many and various. It's a new place for them to navigate, and there are many new risks. You know, the First Minister talked about the radicalisation risk. I'm not going to repeat that, but there are also risks of child sexual exploitation. And I would, at this point, if you're an adult in the room worried about that particular issue, there is advice you can get as an adult, whether you're a grandparent, a parent, a carer, an uncle, an aunt. If you're worried about children in your family or really want to know how to help them navigate their way on the internet, the Scottish Government have a website, CSE The Signs. CSE stands for Child Sexual Exploitation. CSE The Signs. Well, there's a complimentary website from my old team in London, thinkyouknow.co.uk. There's information there that we can help protect our young people and help them lead a more tranquil and peaceful life and avoid some of the dangers and hazards that are out there. It's up to us to speak out where we see those things that are going to actually cause disruption in the lives of our young people, to pick up those moments of prejudice, to actually stand into the gap and say what needs to be said. Quite a few years ago, a German pastor by the name of Niemöller said these words: "First they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me." I think those words ring in my ears about we need to speak out and call out those issues that affect our communities, that affect peace and tranquility and stability in our communities, especially for the young people coming through behind us when our time is done here. Martin Luther King famously said, and he said many famous things, but I quite like his quote, "Life's most persistent question is, what are you doing for others?" My challenge to myself, and to you if you want it, is what are we doing for our young people, irrespective of what community they come from, what creed they come from, what are we doing for our young people? Will we equip them better to be better citizens than we have been, to leave a better world behind them than we could possibly leave? That's about giving them life skills and opportunities, removing the prejudice from society. Will we as the police service design better services to support you and communities, to deal with hatred, to deal with violence? I hope so, and we need help in doing that, and we're very grateful for the help we have. But when I go right back to Forrest Whitcraft and his wisdom from 1950, from very humble beginnings, 100 years from now, it won't matter what's in any of our bank accounts, what sort of cars any of us have driven, nor will it matter what sort of house that we've lived in. But I hope for all of us the world will be different and better because we've been influential in the life of at least one child, if not many, many more. I think this is a really important conference. Thank you for the chance to speak today. Thank you for what you do to support your police service, because we are simply citizens who happen to have the privilege to wear the uniform. But hopefully together we can make this country even stronger. It's a great place as it is, despite the weather, but it's a great place to live. And I'm obviously not a local by birth, but this is home for me and has been for the majority of my adult life. I'd love to leave it just a wee bit better for those coming behind, if that's at all possible. Thank you, Azam. Thank you to the Society, and I wish you well with the theme of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johnny, and thank you for bringing to everyone's attention
you know, it isn't just about hearing other people, but we're all here, we're all invited here because we've all got an important part to play in making this world a better place, in developing peace and unity and looking after our children. And of course, the children and young people are the future of the whole world, so it's so important. I'm delighted to be able to introduce our next speaker. In Scotland, we're very fortunate to have, as in other countries in the UK, but we have a Children and Young People's Commissioner and an Office of the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland. And our next guest, Nick Hobbs, is Head of Advice and Investigations at the Children's Commissioner's office. It's his role to make it easier for children to raise concerns if their rights aren't being respected. Previous to coming to work for the Children's Commissioner, he worked in the children's hearing systems. I'm not sure how aware everybody is. I'm sure some people will be aware that in Scotland we have a very unique system for dealing with young children, young people at risk, the children's hearing systems, whereas in England people get into a much more formal court system. In Scotland we have a much more child-friendly and productive system. And that's the children's hearing system. And previously Nick worked as the Policy and Public Affairs Manager for the Scottish Children's Reporters Administration in that system and dealt with cases involving inequalities and trafficking. And he's currently also Chair of the Board of Trustees at the Scottish Child Law Centre. Nick's background includes a law degree and an MSc in Human Rights and International Politics from the University of Glasgow, and he's also travelled in Latin America, China and Central Asia. He lectures occasionally on children's rights and the hearing system at the University of Edinburgh and Edinburgh Napier Universities, and he also writes on these subjects. So I'm really pleased to welcome Nick Hobbs as our next speaker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the organisers for their kind invitation to be here this evening, representing Bruce Adamson, the Commissioner for Children and Young People Scotland. I've been asked to say a few words about the work of our office and about children's rights. So firstly, the role of the Commissioner is to promote and safeguard the rights of children and young people in Scotland. And we often refer to it in terms of making sure that promises are kept. At the heart of the Commissioner's role is the 1989 United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And the Convention is the most rapidly and widely ratified international human rights treaty in history. It changed the way that children are viewed and treated in international terms. It proclaims children's status as human beings with a distinct set of rights and not just as passive objects of charity and care. And we can understand those rights as a set of promises made by our government on our behalf that we should do certain things to make life better for children and young people. Those promises are made internationally, but it was recognised that there was a need for domestic actors to ensure that those promises were given life and meaning at an international level. And at its heart, that is the Commissioner's job, to ensure that those promises are kept, by reminding people of what they are, by exploring what they mean, by monitoring how they're translated into practice, and by holding people accountable when implementation falls short of what's required. And my own role, as Faria said, is to make sure that the Commissioner's investigative powers are used to best effect. And that's just one of the ways in which we exercise that accountability function. The Commissioner's remit extends to all children, from birth to 18 and up to 21 for those who've been in the care system. He also has a duty to consult children and young people about his work and involve them in it. And we're currently in the process of consulting on our strategic plan, empowering children and young people to help set the Commissioner's priorities for the next 2 years. The first declaration on the rights of the child, made way back in 1924, emphasised that mankind owes to the child the best it has to give, and the child must be the first to receive relief in times of distress. This, and subsequent declarations, including the UN Charter in 1945, and the Universal Declaration on Human Rights in 1948, which made clear that childhood is entitled to special care and assistance, laid the groundwork for the UNCRC. Their sentiments are especially relevant in terms of the subject matter of this conference and what they say about a world that children tell us they often find chaotic and frightening. We're going to hear later about issues such as trafficking, radicalisation, the effects of armed conflict. It can be too easy to fall into despair when faced with these apparently huge, seemingly insurmountable problems and levels of need. And should you find yourself feeling that way, perhaps it's worth considering the words of Eleanor Roosevelt. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they can't be seen on any maps of the world. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. So perhaps it's easier to start with something more manageable and with an example of how children's rights can be protected closer to home. Within the preamble to the UNCRC, setting the context for what follows, is the recognition that children should grow up in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding. The Convention goes on to proclaim that the best interests of children should be a primary consideration in all matters that affect them, including decisions taken by legislative bodies. And we know that the rights set out in the UN Convention are all interconnected. This means that if we want to understand what's in the child's best interests, we must look to the other Convention rights, and indeed to that preamble, particularly as we know that there are interconnections in real life between rights to health and poverty, education and recreation, safety and development. When I received the invitation to attend this event, I looked up the meaning of Ahl al-Bayt. And I hope that Google hasn't led me astray, but I understand that it refers to family, and specifically to the family of the Prophet Muhammad. We sometimes see children's rights presented as if they're drawn in opposition to the rights of parents, and particularly to the right to family life as set out in the European Convention on Human Rights. But when parents and family members call our office to seek advice, for example in relation to education, additional support needs or mental health, they often do so because they regard themselves as defenders of their children's human rights, and they're correct to do so. And in fact, the UNCRC recognises the important role that the family can play in protecting children's rights. It understands that families of all kinds can create an environment in which respect for children's rights thrives. They can create an atmosphere of happiness, love and understanding, where children's best interests are promoted. You may be aware that Scotland has the potential to be the first country in the UK to bring about the legal change necessary to provide children with equal protection from assault. John Finney MSP intends to introduce a bill to the Scottish Parliament before the end of the year. And some people have presented this as an attack on family life and on the rights of parents. Now, after what I've just said, you won't be surprised to hear that that's not a view that I share. The family is an environment in which we protect and nurture children's rights. Many of the duties owed by the state to parents are intended to ensure support for children, and children's rights to enjoy family life and their right to protection from violence are interconnected. So I was interested and delighted to hear Sheikh Rehan Raza Al-Azhari on the BBC at the weekend explain that the proposed change in the law was entirely consistent with an Islamic view on what constitutes good parenting. I think that's a really helpful perspective. And I hope that Scotland's communities of faith can continue to contribute to this discussion as it moves into the Parliament. If we pride ourselves on being a progressive country, a country that values children and is committed to offering them the best outcomes in life, then we need to make sure that this legislative change happens at the very earliest opportunity. It's in the best interests of children, and I commend the Scottish Government for agreeing to support it. The First Minister said quite correctly that there's a lot in Scotland we should be proud of in terms of our support for children's rights. I totally agree with that. My own background, as Faria said, is within the children's hearing system, and I'm an unashamed advocate for that system in terms of how it protects children's rights. But one of the challenges for making rights real here in Scotland is that the UNCRC is not directly incorporated into domestic law. That means that although it's increasingly influential in discussions around policy, practice and legislation, it's not directly justiciable in our domestic courts. And I welcome the Scottish Government's recent commitment to examine further the possibility of incorporation. It's something that our office has been calling for a very long time. And again, I hope that's a debate that everyone here will contribute to. This event today is impressive in the numbers that have turned out to express, in concrete terms, in the midst of your no doubt crowded and pressurised professional lives, your commitment to the rights of children and young people. That level of commitment and care must surely provide a strong basis for faith in our ability to succeed. I wish you well in that endeavour on behalf of the Commissioner, and I promise that the Commissioner and his staff will do all that we can to join with you in it. And I'd like to end, if I may, with another quote, this one from Kofi Annan. "There is no trust more sacred than the one the world holds with children. There is no duty more important than ensuring that their rights are respected, that their welfare is protected, that their lives are free from fear and want, and that they can grow up in peace." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick, for a very humbling contribution. I want to pay tribute to the vast knowledge and experience that Nick has obviously gained from his profession, and we're very grateful that he is here today to present that, and we wish him well in his continued work in the future. Our final contribution comes from a very young lady who didn't intend to present herself at this conference such as this, but in a fateful trip to Iraq recently, Haneen Hadi became immersed in the local community struggles and wanted to desperately to give something back. She could offer smiles, but she was moved so much by their reciprocal kindness that she felt this needed to be recorded. Her medium was the camera, and since then it has fueled her passion to study photography. I've personally seen Haneen growing up, and she is a very humble soul who doesn't crave the spotlight and wants her camera to do the talking. But tonight she will narrate her experience in Iraq with a slideshow in the background. In support of her, please give a very generous round of applause to Haneen Hadi.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Haneen Hadi. I'm 17 years old. I'm a part-time photographer, and I'm also currently studying photography at Glasgow Kelvin College. There's this one question that I always seem to ask myself. Until today, I have no answer to it. Why is it that the rate of charitable organisations are increasing whilst the rate of poverty around the world is also increasing? And as a result of this question, I became my own charitable organisation. And I'm here today to share my experience of my recent trip to Iraq, where I visited one of the least privileged areas there, called Al Fahama neighbourhood. It all started from a very young age, when I would go to Iraq to visit my family every summer. During each visit, I would feel very uncomfortable being in my hometown and surrounded by so much poverty. Poverty resulted by the war and existing for many years now. So I would always want to do something to make a change. And here I am today, and I hope everyone can take a valuable lesson from this experience. World is one thing. However, witnessing the lives of these unprivileged people with your own eyes is a total different experience. I was not intending to film my experience, and if you're thinking why, I will explain throughout my talk. On my first visit to this area, I was so hurt by what my eyes had witnessed, and even till this day I struggle to express what it was like. I was in so much shock that my hands were unable to hold grip onto anything, not even the envelope of money I had organised for each family, never mind be able to hold my camera steadily to record. However, that's not why I was not intending to film this experience. Personally, I had never encountered poverty like this before in my life. And something I realised actually was that the most repeated phrase expressed by the poor children was, "I'm thankful, and I thank God in whatever state I'm in." Usually in Iraq, even the area where my family stay, there are many poor families. However, there are other people in the area that they can rely on. But at Al Fahama neighbourhood, everyone is poor. So if a family was to receive help and support by their neighbours, you will actually find that the neighbours will be looking to receive the same, if not more, help and support as them. And this is what made it truly heartbreaking. For me, this was an opportunity to help as much children and families as I could. I visited 10 houses in total, and I was only able to capture footage from this household because as I would move on to the next house, the worse the condition of the family would get. And that was what made it emotionally difficult for me to continue to film. This family had lost their father as a result of fighting to protect his country and keeping the people of his country in safe hands. However, generosity was dripping from each home I entered, and the children wouldn't let me out of their homes unless they gave me something in return. And the most valuable action of mine to the people of this neighbourhood was not providing them with an envelope containing money, but the action of love and happiness I provided them with, and that was what meant the most to them. They couldn't believe that someone had thought of them and approached them to create smiles on their faces and fill their hearts with happiness. I had no words left in me, and I was unable to hold back my tears. And I can still remember my mama telling me that I had to be strong if I wanted to make these beautiful people happy. I've realised that the things you and I take for granted are the things these innocent people are praying for. And knowing that you're granted with so much in life and taking advantage of the basic things you require in order to live makes it a terribly challenging experience to witness starving children, poor electricity and unhygienic water supplies. People don't realise that a smile costs nothing but can give so much. It takes a moment, but the memory of it could last forever. Happiness is definitely the importance of life, and I was only able to provide this happiness and help a drop in the ocean compared to the number of abandoned families, children, and even newborn babies. Until this day, I constantly remind myself that my help and comfort to these generous people might seem little in the eyes of many, but to the eyes of those I offered my help and comfort to is valuable. And from this experience, I've realised that happiness really does come from the heart rather than materialistic things. And I also believe that many real-life lessons come from witnessing real-life experiences. And this is an issue happening all over the world, and my heart aches for the innocent little children that have to suffer. We don't have the choice of what colour we are, where we're born, or who our family are. But what we do have is the choice of what we make out of our lives once we're here. Okay, so now coming back to why I was not intending to film my experience. Personally, I was doing this for myself and for the hundreds of underprivileged people of this neighbourhood, as I always aspire to offer as much as I possibly can. However, leaving this area, knowing I was only able to help 10 out of these hundreds of houses, made me realise that I have to take care of all these people. They need my help, and I must look after these innocent people, because if I don't, who will? I must serve humanity, and I must create my own unique structure that makes sure the needs of these people are met, because they deserve it as much as we all do. Thank you for listening.
How do you follow that? A very special contribution to Haneen. Thank you so much. Again, I have to stress that she had no intention when she travelled to Iraq to film any of this or document any of this, but it is a purely organic result, and we wish her very well in her future work and professional study. We now draw close to the first part of our program today of the guest speakers. We have to send a very big thank you to all of the guest speakers that have already presented to us today. Thanks to Azam for helping to facilitate this conference, obviously the First Minister for setting the standard and giving us the framework for today's discussion, and also to, of course, Sheikh Shumali for his insightful words of wisdom, Johnny Gwynn for his reflective stories that I very much enjoyed, very much inspirational to hear, and of course Nick Hobbs for highlighting the conventions and impending rights that we have available to us and injecting that positivity into the proceedings as well. And of course to Haneen for that very heartfelt and emotional contribution. Thank you, I really appreciate that. So now we have a small break.